Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. You are listening to the episode with Samantha Patrone. She's also known online as Necrotic Nymph. And I just wanted to let you know that this is the last episode of June. Congratulations, we've made it halfway through. On the same day as this episode is released, we also have our Harry Potter 20th anniversary episode. So definitely check that episode out. It is a fun one. I just wanted to run down what's happening in July. On July 3rd, we have Samantha, another Samantha, also known as Scarlet Sparrow. On the 10th, we have local Central Floridian Katie Knudsen, who is an artist. July 17th is talking to Kat. She's also known online as Moonetta, and she was over in Hong Kong when we recorded. July 24th is with the Dungeon Master and host of You Meet in a Tavern, Joe Della Bella, and that is an excellent episode, and I'm looking forward to that coming out. And on July 31st is one of the hosts of Manifest Zone and Eberron podcast, Christian Serrano, and we get to talk about Eberron and how he converted Eberron into a Savage Worlds game setting. So that is really cool, especially with some podcast stuff that's coming up. We should have 2 new podcasts launching in the month of July and or August. The first one is going to be Tales from the Golden Yoke, which is a podcast with my sister Laura and myself, where we are talking about how Laura went from being a college student to now owning a farm in Montana with cows and pigs and sheep and chickens and doing a ice creamery and everything that's led up to that, and then focusing on the weekly operations of having a farm and an ice creamery out in Montana. The other is going to be called Tales from the Five Nations. It's going to be a Eberron actual play with Savage Worlds as the system instead of traditional Dungeons and Dragons system by Wizards of the Coast. So I'm really excited to get that started. By the time that you're listening to this episode, we're going to be almost recording the first episode for that. And again, I'm hoping to have both of those podcasts launched sometime in July. So keep your ears and eyes open on Facebook or by listening to the podcast. I'll be giving updates as time goes on. And again, just as a note, we do have a Patreon site, which is patreon.com/talesfromthefandom, where if you even just pledge $1, it goes towards helping with the hosting costs of this podcast as well as the other future podcasts that we have coming out. And you'll get early content as far as who I'm recording with, pictures of the people I'm recording with, schedules of upcoming episodes, and basically whose episode has been recorded. And then you'll also get shout-outs on the podcast as well. Or if you contribute a higher amount, there's possibilities for promotions on the podcast and just other collaborations. So definitely check that out. And if not, everything will continue to be the same, especially on the Facebook page. Everything does get posted on the Facebook page. And I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for continuing to listen and supporting this podcast. Have a great day. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is a local Floridian. She is known as Samantha, but she also goes by her cosplay name on the internets as Necrotic Nymph. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Samantha.
Pleasure to be here.
So, I guess the first thing I always like to ask people, and I really liked your description, is how would you describe fandom?
As I described it, in our initial interview, I like to think of it as a kingdom of fans. It's just like a little community of fans that we all just kind of hang out, and we, like a family, we sometimes have the crazy uncle or the person we kind of have to be like, oh, stay away from them. But, we're also forming really great friendships and brotherhoods along the way, too.
Right. I know one of my previous guests used to think of it as like little city-states that sometimes would, do business with each other and sometimes would go to war.
Yes, there's a lot of war in the fandom sometimes.
Oh, most definitely. And I try to stay far away from that as I can because it gets crazy.
Yes, it definitely does.
Now, you're into a lot of different fandoms, some classic like Star Wars or Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, but you're also into some newer ones that we were talking about beforehand, and some ones that have been around for a long time. So what fandoms are you into, besides those ones that I mentioned?
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously I love the classics and, your Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Marvel, Harry Potter, Pokemon, all that kind of stuff. But my biggest fandoms right now are going to be Overwatch, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering. Those are kind of like my trifecta.
Well, let's start with Overwatch. We were just talking about it. We're recording this episode in March, and they just released a new character, and I know you are itching to get onto the console and play.
Yes, I'm like sitting here. My boyfriend's actually across the room right now playing, and I'm kind of jealous. But yeah, they just released Orisa, so I'm stoked to play her.
Now, I'm not a first-person shooter type of person. I remember playing Wolfenstein and Doom way back in my early high school days, and that was the extent of my first-person shooterness because it didn't require complex button combinations. It was like spacebar to shoot and the arrow keys to move, and that's all you needed. And now, like, shooters have progressed to the point where it's like all sorts of button combinations.
Yep, there's all sorts of abilities, and especially with Overwatch, each character has a unique ability, and pretty much the only thing that's consistent is primary fire and like maybe jumping, and of course ulting. So.
Well, what drew you to Overwatch? Because I know like it had been built up, and there's like the really cool like trailers for it. And even I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool, but then I realized what type of game it was. I was like, I don't think I can really play that.
Yeah, what drew me to it is my roommate was playing it, and then I kind of got into the fandom, as we were discussing, through the internet, and I was learning about all these characters, and really just the richness of the characters is kind of what drew me to it, and I wanted to start playing it. So I started kind of piggybacking on my boyfriend's account, and then we ended up going and getting a computer, and so now I have my own account, and I've actually, even though I've been playing for less than half the time as my roommate, I've already surpassed both my boyfriend and my roommate in level, so I'm very proud of myself.
Well, awesome, and congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like 177 now, which isn't very much when in the grand scheme of things, but I've only been playing for a few months, so.
Now, with Overwatch, obviously it's a team-based shooter. But do they give you backstory information on the characters? Like, is there like published books or blog journals or entries about like each of the characters?
Yes, the website, which is interesting because it's not in the game, but there's a website that has, official Blizzard website that has all of the backstories, vague backstories of the characters and some of their connections with each other. And then what's interesting about the game is that it has little interactions between the characters depending on what map you're on and who's on your team. You'll get little tidbits that kind of give you like an insight into what those characters' relationships are.
Okay.
And some of them are really funny and some of them are kind of sad and some of them are just, really cute. So you kind of get that. And then there are comics and there are like other little outside things and little videos. They have shorts which are actually beautifully animated and really, really amazing. So I highly recommend that for anyone who's just interested in learning a little bit about the characters. There's just really good content out there for Overwatch.
Yeah, that's one of the things I liked about Overwatch is the really beautiful character detail. Like, the character models are phenomenal.
Yeah, they're really beautiful and they're really diverse, which I love about it. They've got, characters from all around different countries and everything, and you've got maps to correspond with them as well, so you're going into this, pseudo-culture. Obviously, a lot of them are fictionalized, but there's still a lot of that around inspired by real places, so I like that a lot.
Who's your favorite character to play?
I am a Mercy main. However, since I will be cosplaying her in the future, I've started playing Widowmaker a lot, and I've also got my next most hours is on Diva, so it goes Mercy, Diva, Anna, Widowmaker, and then Genji.
What drew you to Mercy? Just out of curiosity, because everyone likes a certain character, and I know for me, based on like the games that I play, like where you have to pick a character out of the multitude, it's based on like how like my play style is. And I guess the best thing I can equate it to is like Super Smash Brothers. I always go for the quick, fast characters.
Me too. I am a Sheik and Zero Suit Samus main.
See, I'm like, I can't remember what it is. It's like Toon Link or Young Link. Like those are my guys right there, because they're just quick, they're small, they can get in and out, they can move around.
Yeah, exactly. And with me, you know, for example, fighter games, I always go for those quick characters. It's pretty rare that I go for a character that's not necessarily fast. I mean, in Soul Calibur, I'm a Talim and Taki main back before they got rid of Talim, which is a point of contention for me. But when it came to Mercy, I read a post about her and saw that she could fly around, and I thought that was really cool because I have a thing for like angels, and one of my favorite characters in Magic the Gathering is an angel, so I really loved the angel symbolism of her character, and so I kind of gave her a try, and I was really good at it. My roommate and my boyfriend both complimented me on my healing abilities because I'm always on everybody at all times because I'm trying to be the best healer, and so she kind of clicked with me. And then Diva I picked because I wanted to be able to pick someone who was useful in battle as well.
Okay. So Mercy's more of a healing type character?
Yeah, Mercy is pretty much all heals. She has a pistol, but it's really just to protect herself. She is main heals. Okay. She's the one that can resurrect people, like, once they die. She can resurrect them, and it can really change games.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. That is something I know. Like I've been watching some of those like the videos, and it's always interesting to see like how quickly characters like just die and then they bring back the character, like, or they pick a new character and spawn again. And
yeah, it can be pretty fast paced. Sometimes it feels like you're waiting forever to respawn though.
What was interesting to me about Overwatch is not only how quickly it got like to be like the competitive level of it, but how quickly people started cosplaying as characters from that game.
Oh yeah, it's a really aesthetically pleasing game. All the characters look really cool, so it's something that I think really appealed to cosplayers and even a lot of people that don't even play the game. They might not have access to the game itself, but maybe they're interested in the other things like the shorts and the comics and just really like the characters and the lore, and they can, you know, really express themselves through cosplaying the characters.
That's definitely something I'm going to have to look into, is the comics and the videos, because while I can't play the game, I do enjoy watching it from time to time, but I really enjoy just the character designs, and I want to know more about those characters, and I've read some of the stuff that's come out about the different characters, and it's got me intrigued to the point where I want to know more, but I know that I don't think like the shooter game is not going to be giving me that type of storyline that I would desire. That I could, now that I know that there's comics, I can go out and get some comics.
Right, yeah, and I definitely recommend the shorts. I think they give like a good insight into the characters as well, and it kind of gets you immersed without having to actually play the game if you can't or don't want to.
Now, is there a single player version of Overwatch, or is it all multiplayer? Like you have to be on the internet to play it?
You can play like with bots and stuff, but not in a capacity of not being online. It's all online stuff.
Okay. No single player missions then or anything?
No, we're thinking they might do it in the future, but right now Blizzard doesn't really have the story pinned down, as hilarious as that sounds. There were certain comics that were coming out, and then they changed things so much in-game that they had to basically scrap the comic because it was no longer canon. So it's something where we're not really sure what they're going to do with it and what we're going to get out of it, but I think that single-player missions, or maybe like even just like small co-op things, would be really cool, just to get a feel for certain characters that have really deep connections with each other, like Soldier 76 and Reaper, for example. I think that would be really awesome.
Right. I know. I was talking to one of my previous guests. He's an author. His name's Matt Forbeck, and he was writing the Guild Wars novels, like when Guild Wars 2 was being put together, and he would get notes or emails after he'd written like 10,000 words, or let's say, and they'd be like, well, we changed X, Y, and Z in the game, so you need to change your story.
Oh, gosh, that's got to be terrible.
I can imagine, like, the people that are, like, not only are they writing or making the storyline for this comics, but they're doing all the art, and then okay, what you've done is great, but we've gone in a different direction.
Yeah, that would be really frustrating. I dabble in writing, but I could never. I can imagine just writing 10,000 words and then it means nothing.
Nothing! So, for Overwatch, is it a game where you sit down, you play it for fun? Are you actively trying to get into, like, tournament play or like, competitive play?
I'm competitive with, like, friends, but I'm not the kind of person that likes to do tournaments. I'll be real honest with you. There's a lot of sexism in the industry when it comes to a professional level. This and Magic is another place where I see it, and it kind of turned me off to the whole being competitive on a level where I'm around other people that are not just my friends.
Right.
So to answer that, no, wouldn't really be something I would be interested in. I did dabble in a bit of competitive, and I placed very well, but as a mercy, which I think that healers are very highly underrated, and so they get excited when they get a healer on their team. But it's definitely something that I wouldn't really pursue at this point in time.
I have a friend that plays Overwatch occasionally, and she's told me on a few occasions that she just turns her mic off.
I never use my mic, pretty much ever.
Yeah, because, you know, the stuff that is said to her is obviously not worth repeating. Yeah. But it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm on PC, and I remember back when I used to play on Xbox and Xbox 360, it was really bad, and I think that it's not as bad on PC, but maybe I'm just not turning my mic on enough, but I usually stay away from turning on my mic at all.
Yeah, it's disappointing that that's, like, out there and existing, because it's just so ridiculous. Like, and you brought up Magic the Gathering, which we're going to get to, but I remember going into comic book stores, especially in college, like comic book / gaming stores, and it was weird. Like, when a girl walked in, there was definite, like, what is she doing here? Or it was like the other people that were there, like, kind of swarmed her, or got, like, a little bit too close for comfort type of thing, and is like, God, like, just let her browse the comics or browse the games that she's looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So crazy.
Yeah, we have a really small game shop near me, specifically, you know, for cards, and every time I've gone there, it's just been kind of, like, uncomfortable, and, like, the one or two times that I've entered a tournament, I was kind of treated like a second-class citizen, and I didn't really appreciate it, so I basically said, no more of that, we just do our drafts at home, and I've got a group of, like, 6 guys that I play with who actually treat me like a human being, so I like that.
Treat everybody like a human being.
Yep.
Everybody. Let's start there. Okay.
Yeah.
Build from that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty simple one.
Going from Overwatch, which is an awesome Blizzard product, and obviously they have a ton of other awesome Blizzard products. Mm-hmm. There is a fandom that you're into that was around. I guess, I don't know if it came before Pokemon or it kind of hit after Pokemon. It was in that, like, late 99s, 2000s period and I've seen a few of the episodes, and all I can say is that it's about a boy that has, like, spiky blonde hair, but then he changes into, like, an older teenish version of himself, and they battle with cards, and it's an anime called Yu-Gi-Oh! That was really popular.
Yes, yeah, that's probably my, like, main fandom that although I have taken breaks from it, I've never really left it. It was a huge, huge impactful part of my childhood, and it's kind of followed me now into my adulthood, and it's definitely been a way that I've made friends and spent money and all sorts of stuff.
It's all about spending money.
Yeah, pretty much. But I would say Yu-Gi-Oh! To describe it to a person that's never seen it is, it's people saving the world with children's card games, pretty much. That's pretty much it.
I really liked, from the bits that I saw, because I was either catching it, I think it's on Cartoon Network, or it might have been on Fox. I can't remember where it was airing back in that time. But I really enjoyed the battles. Like they would pull the cards out, and then obviously the cards get animated. And some of the animations on the cards were phenomenal. And then the way that they battled and did the duels and stuff, it looked really cool. But I didn't ever get the whole what's actually happening in the story thing.
Sure, and I'm gonna go real philosophical here for a moment. So the way that Kazuki Takahashi wrote the series is basically every duel is a reflection of the emotional and physical struggles that everyone in the duel is going through. So, for example, you have someone experiencing, grief and loss, and then in that duel you will see it kind of come to a head as far as how the monsters interact with each other and what cards get destroyed and things like that. It's basically telling a story through the cards and through the struggle of that game, because you can't always really translate these types of emotional battles into a way that children will understand it. But if you put some really cool monsters battling, then they get the feel and the emotion of it without having to really understand the true nature of what exactly is going on, but they can still grasp it. And that's what I really liked about that series, is that it seems like it's really silly, of course, because you're thinking, saving the world with children's card games, but really every single duel kind of comes down to this really serious matter that's being explained in a way that is simple for children to understand.
That's definitely something that I had no clue about.
Right. Well, there's a whole big backstory with it. Like, the card game actually came from Egypt, and it was like sorcerers fighting each other. The spiky-haired kid, Yugi, he is possessed by the spirit of a 5,000-year-old pharaoh who was like the king of games, and he's basically trying to find his memories. It's a really big, complicated storyline, and you wouldn't know it just by glancing at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he wears a pyramid necklace or something.
Yeah, the Millennium Puzzle, that's what holds the spirit of the pharaoh, and that's how he transforms.
Now, I have to ask, how did you get into that show? Was it just right time, right demographic, it got you?
Pretty much. I can't remember if I caught the show on TV first or if I saw the cards and got interested. I feel like I might have watched the show first on, Toonami or some similar time block, because that's how I got into anime in general. That's how I found, Sailor Moon and DBZ. But I found Yu-Gi-Oh! And then I learned there were cards, and I was like, oh man, I gotta have this. This is cool. And I don't even know what really drew me to it at the time. I know what I like about it now, but I don't know what drew me to it at the time, but it hooked me so hard and so fast. I had so many cards and so many decks, and I was just really obsessed. My name Necro, Necrotic Nymph, every iteration of my nickname that I've had from going back into the early 2000s has come from Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I used to play a Necro Destiny deck, and that's literally how I got my nickname.
I think about the people who have screen names and usernames and stuff. And it's always from something, but I would never have thought it would be from a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck or playing style.
Yep, it was definitely Yu-Gi-Oh! My friends all called me Necro because I beat their butts with the Necro Destiny deck, and I kind of got a rep for it. And then as I got through my different fandoms, I would change my name from a Necro Dueler to Necro Ninja to Necro whatever. And then now I just finally settled on Necrotic Nymph because I went through a phase of really liking Greek mythology. So Here we are.
Here we are. Now, we were talking before, because we were talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Before we started recording, and a movie's come out, because, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was around, late 90s, early 2000s, really popular, and then it kind of disappeared, while Pokemon and some other stuff has continued on.
Well, the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is it never actually disappeared. They just started creating, increasingly more terrible spin-off series. Like they started they started with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, and then it went to Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which was okay but weird, and then Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which was card games on motorcycles, which the main character was cool, but it was ridiculous. I mean, card games on motorcycles. And then the next one, I think, was Zeal, and then they went to Arc V or Arc 5. I don't even know how it's pronounced, but, like, the hair of the protagonist gets, like, progressively more ridiculous, and then the plot gets progressively more ridiculous. And I don't know, there was just this certain magic of the original that they just never recaptured for me, and Eric Stewart, who voices the American version of Seto Kaiba, also has said that, you know, the original, the new ones never really got to that level of appeal as the original ones did. Then the new ones just don't have that same appeal. And I think he's absolutely right. I think there's just something about that original series that just kind of captured people's imaginations, and the new ones just haven't. So it kind of went into obscurity for a bit until the new movie just came out, which reprised, you know, the characters from the original Duel Monsters series and kind of gives us, like, a true ending. Because the ending of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters is actually incredibly sad. It's really, really depressing. It's very, very sad. And this kind of gave us closure on that. Even though it was also sad, there was a bit of closure there and a throwback to, you know, those great times. And honestly, the movie is just, it's visual porn. Like, it's so beautiful. Like, the animation is just so stunning. The colors are just so rich. It was beautiful. I was just amazed in the theater.
Now, did it come out here, like, in the Florida area?
It did. I actually had to drive, because I live in the middle of the state, and I had to drive to Tampa to see it. We went Orlando opening night, and we didn't buy tickets ahead of time, and it was sold out. And so we went the next night to Tampa to go see it, and the theater was empty, so that was a little ironic. I guess all the nerds live in Orlando.
Well, I'm in Orlando, so
there you go. Yeah.
But the only one I realized that was coming out that they had Sailor Moon. I was like, oh my gosh, Sailor Moon's going to be in the movie theater.
Yeah, I think that one got a little bit more of a release, but to be honest, I'm not really sure as far as how many theaters. I will say that where I live, which is kind of like Podunk Town, we get the DBZ movies when they come out, but we did not get Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't think we got Sailor Moon either. So sometimes it's kind of a crapshoot on what we get. But I drove like an hour to go watch the movie, and I'll tell you, it was phenomenal, and I would have done it again if my schedule had permitted me to.
That's always the way it is with podunk towns. I mean, I remember I went to high school in Panama City, Florida, up in the Panhandle. And there were movies, like mainstream movies that were coming out all over except in our movie theater. And I don't think that they got them until after they won, like, Golden Globes or Oscars. And then they're like, okay, we'll put it in the theater for, like, a week or two.
Yeah, there were times when we were not getting movies that were, like, critically acclaimed, like Elizabeth the Golden Age, and, like, we weren't getting any of the Chinese foreign films or anything like that, and it really bothered me because those are, like, some of my favorite kind of films. Is like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is, like, up there as one of my favorite films of all time, so
right?
For me, yeah, it's a great film, so the sequel not so much, but
yeah, like, when I was in college in Pensacola, which is like a 2-hour drive from Panama City, their movie theaters, they had Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and you would get, like, all those cool movies, whereas back home in Panama City, they wouldn't have even been there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. But thankfully, I'm close enough to the other towns that I can just kind of zip on over to Tampa or Orlando, and it's not a huge deal. But, when it's a limited run, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Only ran for, like, a week and a half, so it was hard for me to get a time where I could go out and do it and not have it interfere with my schedule. But it's coming out on DVD in March, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
That's like an Insta-buy, right?
Yeah, it's going to be instantly downloaded, and I will probably watch it, like, at least 7 times.
And you said that they have, is it a new show coming out that's following up, but it's going to have new characters, right?
Yeah, they're basically, the movie is closing out the very first series, but then they're going to be making a 6th series, and as I said, Progressive progressively more ridiculous. So he's got crazy hair, and he has the main character. I think he's dueling on hoverboards, and then there's some kind of VR involved, and it's going to be ridiculous.
Oh boy, virtual reality.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, my roommate has one of those, so I'm just kind of imagining, like dueling with those virtual reality headsets on. Like, why are we even watching this? They're just doing this on a headset.
I like that there's a video of somebody doing like VR and then they fell over.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that happens all the time.
I think I'll stay seated and not VR for right now.
Yeah, there's some cool ones on there. Like I did like the little under the ocean one, like, oh no, I'm getting attacked by a shark, and it's got its appeal, but I don't know. I don't think I could immerse myself in a game like that unless if it was really stellar.
Right, exactly. I think the only one that I wanted to try was like you're an eagle flying around.
Yeah, that one looked really, really neat.
You got into the cards too. Like, did you play the game, the Yu-Gi-Oh game back in the day?
Oh man, yeah, I did, and I got all my friends into it. I would build like decks for everybody. Like, I had a really good friend, and I was like, oh, well, you like cutesy stuff, so I'll make you a fairy deck. And then like I would make, yeah, I just made everyone decks, and we all dueled, and I stomped all of them, and then they got tired of playing me because I was, always beating them. My short-lived championship.
That's how it was back in college, which perfectly segues into the next fandom, Magic the Gathering. I'd gotten out of Magic, and I transitioned to like Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games, and then a friend he got back into Magic the Gathering. He's like, I really need people to play with. I'll make you a deck. Like, if you just buy the cards, I'll make you a deck, and I'll teach you how to play with it. And really, it was only he needed people to play with, so that way he could get his deck the way he needed his deck to do it for like his tournaments that he was going to, and he just needed people to like play off of. I was like, okay, I'll play, and I think I invested about $100 into it, and then after a month I was like, I'm done. I mean, this is pretty. I'm not winning. I'm not having fun. But
yeah.
How did you get into Magic the Gathering?
So my story's kind of opposite, and so the very first time that I ever was exposed to Magic is I had already been playing Yu-Gi-Oh very, very much, and I was very efficient at it. I'm really decently good at strategic card games. So I had a friend teach me, but he was one of those friends that kind of like lied about everything. So he lied about the rules of the game so that I literally could not win, and basically told me that this deck could not beat the deck that he was playing. And so I kind of was like, well, this is dumb. I'm going to stick with Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't want to play Magic. It's dumb. And then many years later, I was dating this guy, and he was like, no, I know you were into that Yu-Gi-Oh garbage, but like, let me get you into Magic. It's like a real adult, cards game, and because that's a thing. But he was like, oh, come on, I'll teach you. So he had 3 decks, and he taught me, and because I played Yu-Gi-Oh, I pick up the rules really fast. And so I beat him 3 for 3, with each of his decks, and then he never wanted to play me again.
What? That's so he builds you, he gets you into it, you beat him, and then he's like, I'm done, I don't want to play anymore.
It was literally, he just had these decks already that he and his like friends had played years ago, and then he was like, oh, well, because he was like, back in high school I used to play, and he was in college at that point, and he was like, come on, play me, and I did, and I beat him all 3 times, and he was so salty about it that he never wanted to play again, and I was like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my first run of the game was 9th grade high school, and it had started. I don't even remember like how I got into it. I was associating with the kinds of kids that they're bringing like tech manuals to school, and they started watching anime like Sailor Moon. They had it imported from Japan, and they're like, oh, you need to check this out. And they were the ones playing Magic the Gathering. And that was when 2nd edition had just finished, and they were printing 3rd edition, and that's when I got into it. So, got into it like 3rd edition, 4th edition, Fallen Empires, but then our school, because of, again, living in the panhandle of Florida, is kind of like that special Bible Belt belt buckle.
Yeah.
And, Magic got banned from our school.
Wow, that's terrible.
Because, it's satanic influences.
Of course. I mean, it's not like there's angels in that game or anything.
Oh, of course not. I mean, it's just terrible for kids to have a game that has cards in it. It's so bad.
Yeah, that happened to me with Yu-Gi-Oh! I was going to an evangelical Christian school for a year, and I was playing with some of my friends during recess, and this one girl was like, when you play those cards, you're summoning that demon to the world. And I was like, all right, I mean, that's fine.
So do you still play Magic? Is that something that you're actively into?
Heck yeah. We have a group of like 6 or 7 of us that we get together Friday nights or Saturday nights, depending on our schedules, and we have a really nice big kitchen table at our place, so everyone just kind of plays, and we mostly play Commander, which is specifically a format for multiplayer. It was originally called EDH, or Elder Dragon Highlander. Basically, it's a singleton format, so you have 99 cards that cannot be the same except of basic lands, of course. And then you have a commander, which basically runs your deck. It's like you basically run the strategy around that commander, and you can only have colors in your deck that match your commander's color identity. And basically we build decks around that. And it's really neat because seeing what people do with different strategies and different colors, like you can have the same colors as someone else but do a completely different deck. And we really enjoy it just because multiplayer, it makes multiplayer games last a lot longer because we have so many of us playing that it's more efficient and for our time to do that. Plus, since it's kind of like a legacy format, there's not a huge ban list, and you can basically play with a ton of cards spanning, decades. So there's a lot of variety that you can get out of the decks.
Well, that is awesome, because that's one of the things that always gets me is when I read over the Magic the Gathering tournaments and everything, like ban lists, like, okay, you can ban these cards or these cards. It's like, but they're cards. I just want to play with my cards, but...
Yeah.
I get it. I get that they're trying to keep the rules, tight and everything.
Sometimes they create a card that it's like, but why would you do that? The perfect example of that is Grizzlebrand, but we call him Grizzleband because he didn't even last, a minute in Standard. Standard is, of course, what's allowed to be played in the current block of tournaments. And then for us, we of course, he's banned in EDH or Commander because he's very ridiculous if you run him as a Commander. So, it's just kind of sometimes cards get just the ban hammer immediately. They just ran a ban on some really ridiculous cards in Standard, Emrakul and all of them. These just crazy cards that just do all sorts of wild stuff, and it's because it breaks the meta. And if you're not getting a good variety, then you're not having fun tournaments. And I think that's kind of what they want. Is they want new people. They don't want just veteran gamers. So they want people to feel welcome, and you don't feel welcome if everyone's got a net deck with the same cards in it. So absolutely.
That's one of the things that always gets me is that at a certain point they start the decks that people have are all the same or variations of, and it's just who's lucky enough to pull what they need.
And who wants to pay to play, basically, who wants to go online and just buy the cards and do it. And yeah, that's really kind of what it became. And ironically, they literally banned certain cards to stop that. And then I was looking at the tournament lists for the winners for the last tournament for Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, which are the newest sets. And, I mean, they were all the same decks. It was literally the same decks. There were maybe 3 decks out of a list of, I think it was 30 decks. There were 3 or 4 of them.
Now, do you have, a favorite color, to play, or a mixture of colors?
I play mostly black, because Liliana's my girl. I run every single one of her Planeswalker cards across 3 decks. And then I have currently 7 Commander decks, and most of them have black in them. But I mean, I do run other colors as well. The only thing I don't have right now is a monocolor deck, so I'm still kind of deciding. But I think my first monocolor is going to be a black deck. So 'cause that's that's my color.
That's your jam right there.
Yeah, that's me. I like all that, oh, you can play that, but you're going to suffer to play it, and zombies and coming back from the grave. Like, that's always been my play style, Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, so that's definitely something that really appealed to me. Right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! We run traditional decks, so there's no banned cards, just limited, and I run a Dark World deck, which is literally just cycling through your graveyard, so it's the same thing in Magic. I just love to play Reanimator.
That is awesome. I remember, and you're playing a style, with, I think you said Planeswalkers, which, back when I was playing, there's no such, anything. That's, a whole new part of, what they've got going on in Magic now.
Yeah, that was, a whole new mechanic that they came out with a little bit after you advised that, you stopped playing, and I mean, they're really interesting because you can make a whole deck around Planeswalkers. In fact, my boyfriend has a whole deck that is built solely around Planeswalkers, and it can get pretty dumb. He actually beats us all in number of decks. He has 19 or 18 right now. It's something ridiculous.
I mean, I'm happy that Magic is still out because, artwork, I love the artwork. I love looking at the cards when I get to see them, either online or when I go into the store when they're selling the individual cards. Artwork's beautiful. There's pieces that I would love to have blown up in frames.
Oh yeah, no, they're beautiful.
Yeah, I love the artwork. I love that it's still around. I love that people are playing it. I mean, it's always awesome to go past because I don't go in when there's a tournament, but going past the store, and the whole store is full of people just battling, fighting, doing having fun.
Yeah, and even if you're not into the card game anymore and you don't want to spend the money on it, if you're still interested in the art and the lore, they have recently started doing the stories online because they tried the novels and no one really liked them. They were kind of considered these sort of C-list fantasy novels that no one cared about and kind of got...
Yeah, I think I read the first or second one that came out way back in the day.
Yeah, probably the Return to Ravnica ones, and they just kind of ended up in the dime shelves and no one cared about them and they kind of disappeared into obscurity. But now they do PDFs basically online, and you can just read the Magic story as it happens, and they release it usually whenever there's a new block out. They release it every Wednesday. And I really enjoy the story. It's fantastic. It's actually really what got me so into Magic because I started playing again with my friends, and they, taught me the right way to play and really got me into it and invested in it. And then I started reading about the characters because I followed the page on Facebook, and they're like, hey, this week's Magic story is out. And I was like, oh, I'll give this a go. And I was reading it, and I was like, how dare you get me emotionally invested in the characters, And so now, especially with Avacyn, who I cosplayed a couple months ago, she's an angel that was created by one of the planeswalkers named Soren. He's a vampire. And this angel, she was a protector of the entire plane, and they basically killed her off, but they killed her off in a way that was just so epic and just cinematic, and it was so beautiful, and the art is just glorious, and it got me so emotionally invested that I was like, I have to cosplay her. She's so amazing.
I love when they expand, and it's for anything. It's whatever it is, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic. Just when they are, or even Overwatch, where they expand from just character design or character or a picture, and they start developing the story around it, and they just that's one of the greatest things that I enjoy is getting sucked into the characters of the world.
Yeah, the Magic is really trying so hard to do that right now. They want people to be invested in these characters more than just playing a card game and paying a bunch of money for cardboard crack. They want people to really be invested in these characters and these stories and the story that they're trying to tell. And I think they really started to do that in Shadows over Innistrad, which that was, where Avacyn became, she became maddened. And there was just this moment where in the story where Jace, the main guy, he's like the Mickey Mouse of Magic, I guess you could say, but he kind of looks at Soren after he's destroyed Avacyn, and you just see all these pictures in the story of her influence throughout these sets that have come out over the last, 5-10 years, and the temples that have been built around her and the religions that have been built around her and the people that she's protected and saved. And then he just says, what have you done? And it was just this magic moment of just like it was so impactful that like whenever a friend of mine plays that card with her on it, I'm just like, oh, why?
That is so cool. Something that I always like to do in the podcast when I talk to people is there's always something. There's always something that somebody wants to recommend. I always love recommendations, books, movies, anime, TV shows, games, it doesn't matter. There's always something that somebody feels that there needs to be more eyes on it, more people need to be aware of it. And there is a fantastic recommendation that you have, because I like it, and I'm so happy that you like it, because I haven't seen it since probably my college years. So what is that one thing that you would love to recommend to people that are listening to this episode?
My recommendation, I always recommend to people Vampire Hunter D, because it did come out as like an anime movie in the 1980s, and then they released another one in the 2000s, and neither of them really do justice to the original content, which were novels written by Hideyuki Kikuchi, and they are just so good. Like, if you enjoy Dracula-type novels and sci-fi, like, original, like Mary Shelley Frankenstein, it kind of merges these together in this sort of classic feeling vampire novel, but it's also got this nice rich technology twist in it. And it's not your typical vampire book series, because it's not about, it's romance and all this stuff. There is romance in it, vaguely, but it's really about, this half vampire's journey and what he, experiences along the way, defeating the vampires. And just the rich story building and the art by Yoshitaka Amano, who has done work for Final Fantasy, and like I just adore him. I got to meet him back in '06, and I about died. It was the most amazing experience of my life. But I do have to say, really, Vampire Hunter D, I am always going to hold out that they will make an anime series of it. They've done a limited run manga that I guess kind of got sort of canceled in limbo after 7 books. But the art was so stunning, and I want that, but an anime. Like, the books are so good, and I wish that someone would just pick it up and be like, all right, let's make this an anime, because it would be the next big thing, I promise. Like, it's so good.
And see, I had no idea that there were even novels about this, because I'd only seen the movies.
Yes, there's like 20-something novels. I've only read up to like 17, I think, because then I started having no free time, or all my free time went to Overwatch. But, yeah, there's short stories in the art books that you can also get, like, published separately, and then there's these, like, wonderful novels that are just, they're just so rich in world building and character building, and I literally have, they're the only physical books that I own save Harry Potter. Everything else I do, digital, and I basically will just lend them out to people, and I'll just be like, please just read this, and then I will start lending them to you like a personal library. And I've had some people catch up to to me on the books and just be really, really interested in them, and I got a coworker into it once, and then my boyfriend now, he's read through them, so I'm always excited when I can get people into Vampire Hunter D.
It is one of those shows or movies, whatever you want to say. It's one of those things where we watched it and we were like, how good is this? Like, we had no clue how good it was going to be until we sat down and watched it.
Yeah. And what's funny is that it was the 2000 movie that really got me interested into even looking into it, because I watched it and I was like, I want more. And because the animation was just stunning on that film, and they really put so much effort into it. And the plot had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on in the book, but it was pretty. So I got really into it, and I was like, I'm that person that, like, you like to, go in and read all the different things and, all this lore and give me these breadcrumbs. I want, like, every little tidbit. I'm just going to, like, every morsel, I'm going to eat it up. And so when I found out that there was more Vampire Hunter D, I was like, excuse me? And I just bought, like, every single one that existed. I think when I when I first started reading the novels, the ones that had been translated, because of course they're original Japanese language,
Right.
they originally only had, I think, maybe 3 or 4 of them. I think only 3 of them when I first started, and then I started, just pre-ordering them basically, and as they came I would read them, and I really wasn't interested in a series like that except for like Harry Potter. Like, these are the only series where I was like, yes, the next one's coming out, I'm so hype. But now, again, we're in like 20 something books now, and they're all so phenomenal, and of course Amano's artwork is throughout it, so you just kind of get that little, delving into that world, being able to see, what he's presenting to us. And the translator did such a good job. Like, the wording is just it's so nice. It's just very aesthetic when you're reading it. It's like taking a warm bath. I don't know. It's just, it's so elegant.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, it's just, I love it. I will hand people, the first book and be like, listen, you read this and you come back to me when you want more, because you will want more.
Absolutely. That's the same thing that happened, like, because we watched Vampire Hunter D, like, I think we watched the 2000 movie, and you, like, not knowing that there's even more, that was the same thing that happened with me with one of Hayao Miyazaki's movies, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, like one of his way early, like, 1985 movies. And when I lived in Japan, I found, like, the whole 8-volume manga series, and I was blown away because his, like, 2-hour movie is just such a small portion of what, like, the entire story is, and you're like, what? Like, there's this whole world of story that doesn't even get touched on.
Yeah, I both love and hate that, because it's like, I love it because I'm like, oh, yay, more content. Yeah, give it to me. And then there's moments where you're like, but they didn't do it all.
Right?
Yeah.
I think the way that I found you and asked you to be a guest was there was a local show at Orlando's Fashion Square Mall called is like Coscom, like, art show, and I saw you featured as, like, you were going to be there, and then I don't think when my wife and I got there, like, I don't know if you had gotten there yet, or if you'd been there and, like, had disappeared. We weren't there long, but I think we were there for about an hour because we hadn't anticipated being there. But that's how I found you. So, like, how did you, I guess, start off with, how did you get into cosplay?
I basically I used to do martial arts, and there was this guy in the martial arts school that I was part of, and he found out about Anime Festival Orlando, and this was back in 2005, and he was like, we should go because we both like this, anime stuff. And I was like, okay, and we went, and he was kind of an introvert, so he really didn't have that much fun. But me, I was like, I saw all these people in costumes talking about, like, nerdy stuff, and I was like, oh, my people. And so I kind of was like, this is where I belong. So I started researching, like, where all these conventions were taking place and everything, and I, started getting costumes together and everything. And the first costume I actually ever made myself was Vampire Hunter D from that 2000 movie, because that was, like, my jam.
Right.
But yeah, after that, I just kind of basically became obsessed with it, and I just started doing more and more costumes, and now it's like 11 years later, I've done over 100 costumes, and I just love it.
Do you have any favorites?
Favorite costumes? I really love wearing D. Like, back then it was just so fun to wear him, especially meeting Amano. That was like, it blew my mind. But now, more recent costumes, I really love being Altair from Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
It's just really fun. Number one, to just, like, dress up as a guy is just really fun. And then just walking around and seeing all the people in Assassin's hoodies and just kind of like, safety and peace, brother. Like, just kind of like subtly walking around like, oh, yeah. And then parkouring everywhere is always fun, of course. And I mean, I love costumes where, like, kids recognize who you are because, it's really fun to interact with them and they think you're the real deal. And I used to do princess parties and I do charity events sometimes. So I like to, kind of get into character for them and make it a little magical for them as well. So I enjoy that also.
Okay. How do you pick your characters? Is it more, I always like to ask my my cosplay guests this, is it more the character that you like, the costume, or is it a mixture of both?
It's definitely all of the above. Usually the aesthetic is what gets me first. If I see a character where I'm like, man, I really love their look, The next thing is personality. If I'm like watching this, character and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate them, they're perfect, I love them, like, where you're like, or this character is me, oh my gosh, which kind of, that's how I feel about, Seto Kaiba in Yu-Gi-Oh! He's like the biggest jerk that you'll ever meet, but I just adore him. He's wonderful. I love him. So I was like, man, I gotta cosplay that guy. So that definitely happens where I'm just like, man, this person is me, or this person is, what I aspire to be, or I just find this person so awesome that I have to, dress up as them. And sometimes it's purely for the aesthetic, and I've even done groups where people just need a character, and I'm like, all right, I'll fill, kind of like in Overwatch, like, we need a healer, all right, I'll fill, I'll do what we need. And that has definitely led to me cosplaying some characters that I really don't like, and I would probably not do that again unless if someone really needed me to do it, but it's something that I've done and kind of regret in a way because I just didn't have as much fun. But I really like being characters that I resonate with or really enjoy their stories, because then I can, run into someone and talk really excitedly about this thing that we both are into. And I think that's what's magical about cosplay is you can meet a total stranger, but you instantly have something in common and you can become best friends with that person just because of what you're wearing.
Definitely, and that's one of the things that I really like is, there's the people that, I guess for lack of a better term, like what they used to have at certain conventions are like the booth babes, where they'd hire the people to dress as the characters, but the people wouldn't know what like the actual characters were, or who they were. But I love people that cosplay because of how much they love that character that they are doing.
Yeah, and I mean, booth babes, they want to make money, and I always say I respect that. I wish that I could make money with cosplay. If I could, then I would be rolling in dough right now. But I just haven't gotten to that point. And, I think as long as there's kind of an expectation there of, like, what we're seeing, like, if you're standing at a booth and you're in, a sexy costume and you're there to get, attention for this booth, that's literally your function, and I'm not going to fault you for that. And I think a lot of people saw some people doing that and thinking like, oh, well, obviously that if you're an attractive girl, then you're not really into it. But I always laugh at people that try to challenge me at, nerd cred, because you will lose. I am just the nerdiest, ridiculous person. I'm terrible. I know so many dumb random things about nerd stuff because I like to write and I like to read, and just like you, I like those little morsels of fandom, so I will eat up everything, and I'm that person that says, oh, did you know, and random fact. And so yeah, challenging me to oh, are you really into that, or do you actually play? I mean, I will usually stomp you into the ground with my nerd knowledge because I don't tolerate that gatekeeping garbage. It really bothers me.
That's one of the great things about me doing this podcast is I get to learn so much about so many different fandoms that I've never heard of, or I've heard of it but I don't know anything about, and I get recommendations, and then I start watching shows and reading books and getting behind on like my current shows that I'm supposed to be watching. And
yeah, I always feel like fandom is kind of osmosis for me. Like there's fandoms that I've never even played or, had any involvement in the actual fandom itself, but because I have friends that are into it who, talk so enthusiastically about it, or, cosplay from it, or, I have friends that I follow their blogs and they post about it, I know things about stuff that I probably shouldn't know about because I've never even seen a moment of it in my life, but I know that character's name and I know what their problem is, and somehow I know these things, and
you've got that basic knowledge. Like you have that knowledge where it's like, I don't know how I know it, but I know it, and I know it well enough to at least like get by to have a basic conversation.
Yep, pretty much. That's pretty much it. I can, spot someone from across the room cosplaying something that I've never seen before, but I'm like, oh, I know that character is this, and they're like, oh, you watched that? And I'm like, no, I just know who you are.
Do you have like any crazy cosplay stories? Like, or are you like, well, are you the I guess I hate to say typical, but it's always cosplayers talk about, that con crunch where it's like you've been working on the costume, but it's like those last few days and you've just got to like pull all-nighters and get your costume done. And
I never pull all-nighters because I'm that cranky person that must have sleep. So I won't do that, but I will stay up late to finish costumes. I've gotten better about it, and I've tried to get better about it. If I'm doing a costume the night before, it's because I have already scheduled out like how much time I needed, and I was expecting to do that. I'm usually not too much on the rushing the night before anymore. It still happens sometimes, but I try to be like, okay, well, I need this costume in like, this many weeks, and I know I need this much time to make the costume, so I try to allot it to myself, but it definitely happens where I'm up the night before and I'm like, I calculated wrong. But, oh gosh, I mean, I have crazy cosplay stories. Just wild stuff, like, I'm that person that I have no shame when it comes to going to public places in costume and talking to people, and for some reason I exude this presence of I know things, so people that are just tourists will just ask me questions all the time. Whether I'm in costume or not, they will think that I know things about, like, a theme park or, a hotel, and they're like, I don't know. It's like, and it's not that they think I work there. It's just apparently I just look like a person who knows things. So I definitely get that all the time where I'm in costume and they're like, so what's going on? Like, apparently I look approachable enough for them to, ask me. But I think the craziest thing ever having to do with costumes at all is I had a dead squirrel in my freezer for like 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Everyone's always like, all right, I need some context. So that context is I was working on a Daryl costume from The Walking Dead. I wanted to do like a Daisy Duke sort of girl Daryl.
Okay.
And the first time you see him, he's got like a bunch of dead squirrels on a rope around his, shoulder. So I was like, I'm going to have the dead squirrels so people know who I am. And I'm stupid, and I went on eBay and I bought what I thought was a taxidermied squirrel. However, I apparently cannot read, and it arrived in a brown, like, paper box. Like, it looked like it came from a serial killer. Like, it had, like, just the really basic sort of wrapping in that brown paper, and then it was, like, written in, like, black Sharpie and, like, this really blocky lettering, and it was from Montana, and who lives in Montana? And I was just like, what is this? And I shook it, and I'm hearing water, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I open it, and it's a water bottle and a dead squirrel, and I lift it out by its tail, and there's, like, blood pouring out of the eyes, gore warning, and I am like, I look at my boyfriend, and I'm like, is this a death threat? And he looks at me, and he's like, didn't you buy a squirrel for a costume? And I was like, oh my god! And I go on the internet, and I look at my eBay transactions, and turns out I bought a dead squirrel for taxidermy purposes. It was not pre-taxidermied. So, I put it in the freezer under the Carvel cake, and it sat there for, like, ever, because I was going to get it taxidermied, but it turned out it was too expensive. So, I ended up doing dog toys instead with the little squeakers, and everyone got a hit out of it. They really, it was a hit. They loved it. They got a kick out of it, and it worked, and people knew who I was. But yeah, dead squirrel in my freezer for like 2 years because of cosplay.
That is one of the funniest stories I've ever heard.
I'm so glad to impart that to you.
The only story that comes even remotely close is one of my friends bought a house in North Carolina, and when they moved into the house, they opened up the freezer, and there was a raccoon in it.
Oh my
like a dead raccoon.
Oh, no.
Like it was in the freezer.
Wow.
But yours is infinitely better as far as the story goes.
Just because it was for cosplay.
Cosplay and like for ordering a squirrel off the internet.
I know. Did you know that you
proof that you can order things, anything you want, on the internet.
You can get it on eBay.
There you go. There's a commercial for eBay right there. I needed a dead squirrel for my cosplay. Where did you go to get it? eBay. Well, do you have any plans for cosplays in the future that you're working on now for conventions that are upcoming?
Yeah, I'm working right now. I'm trying to finish a commission for a friend of mine, and then I'm going to be doing Widowmaker from Overwatch, which I'm very excited for. I'm making the armor. I'm not making the actual costume. I bought that part, and I've got a great crew over at Make Me Designs making me my rifle, which is going to be phenomenal. They actually just sent me pictures today, so I'm like really stoked about it. And yeah, I'm stoked for her. And then I am going to be doing hopefully another Seto Kaiba in the future, specifically from the movie, because he's got this like really baller costume in the film with like lights and stuff. So I'm going to be doing that one.
Awesome.
So yeah, those are probably the two I'm most excited about.
And I know we're coming close on time here, and I know that Overwatch is calling your name. So if people are listening and they want to find you on the great social medias in the internet, what's the best places for them to go to?
I post the most on my personal Facebook, which can be followed, and I usually post most of my stuff publicly, so you're welcome to follow me there. I do also have a Facebook page under Necrotic Nymph, which I'm trying to be more active about, so I will get better. I also post decently more on Tumblr as well, and then Instagram. Pretty much I'm Necrotic Nymph everywhere. I don't really have any other special names anywhere else. So yeah, pretty much if you search Necrotic Nymph, you'll find me on the interwebs.
Awesome. So everyone go check out Samantha's Facebook pages. Give her a like or a follow or whatever. I'm not familiar with Tumblr at all, except that people keep trying to tell me that they just reblog stuff. I have no clue about that.
Yeah, it's like basically reposting stuff that already exists into an infinite loop.
Right. That's as much as I can get, and that sometimes it gets a little bit crazy with the fans and fandoms and whatnot.
Yeah, well, like we said about that whole family gathering, sometimes you just gotta, take your racist uncle aside and be like, all right, listen, you need to go sit at the kids' table.
Right. Well, Samantha, I want to thank you for taking the time out to record with me. This has been probably one of the funniest episodes that I've recorded.
Oh, I'm so glad. And it was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.